Hi everyone and welcome to Fresh from my garden. Today I'm sharing some care tips about this beautiful Monstera plant that I grew from cuttings, and also I'll be sharing an update on the daffodil bulbs and Hoya cuttings that I had planted earlier. This is a view of our front garden, and we have a lot of different varieties of plants that are growing here. And I had also shared a view of this front porch in few other videos. So this is a monstera that I grew from cutting, and as you can see that it is looking really healthy and it has grown very well. When we moved into this house, we were looking for different varieties of plants to decorate our front porch. And since it is on the northwest side of our garden, it doesn't receive any direct sunlight except during the evenings, and that made it difficult for us to grow a lot of plants here. Most flowering plants require at least 5 to 6 hours of sunlight every day, and it was impossible to grow a lot of these flowering plants that we wanted to in this front porch. But over a period of time, we discovered a few beautiful foliage plants that we could grow here, and the Monstera plant is one of them. We grew this plant from a cutting that we got from our community garden, and in today's video I'll share more tips on how to take care of this beautiful plant. Now this is another monstera that I have in a different container, and this is not doing very well. One of the main problems that infects monstera plants are mealybugs or small tiny insects that infect the bottom of the leaf, and then the leaves can get shriveled and they can look very unhealthy. So whenever we have this problem, we can use neem oil to spray on all of these plants. And I have few other plants that are growing from cuttings in different containers. So this is an owl planter which I had shared earlier, and in the same planter I had planted cuttings of Monstera, philodendron and pothos. Right now the pothos is the one that is really growing well, and it's right outside our front door, and it is climbing up and growing onto the windows. Monstera plants have similar requirements to pothos and philodendron, and which is why we can use this to grow a combined planter or grow these together in the same container or in the same part of our garden. It's also known as Swiss cheese plant or broken heart philodendron. Now coming to the Hoya cuttings that I had planted in 3 containers. So there are 3 different varieties of Hoya, and in one of the Hoyas there is a lot of new growth and few new leaves that are growing. So as you can see, there is a new shoot that is coming out of this plant and it is looking really healthy, but I'm still waiting for the other 2 Hoya plants to show any signs of new growth, but they still looking healthy and seem to be doing well in the containers where I have planted them. Hoya is not a very fast growing plant, so it'll take some time for them to do well. And here are the daffodil bulbs that I had planted in this container, and out of the 3 bulbs, 2 of them have already germinated well and the third one is starting to germinate. So they are really looking good, and I'm hoping to see some daffodil flowers later on this year. If you haven't seen the previous video of planting daffodils, please do take a look at that video on my channel. Now when taking care of monstera plants, there are a few things that we need to keep in mind for healthy growth and beautiful growth of these plants. This is another monstera that I have in the south side of our garden, but it is on a covered patio, so it receives only filtered light, and it is growing in a hanging planter on a metal gate that we have outside our dining room. I purchased this from the nursery as a small plant with just 3 or 4 leaves, and currently they are doing really well. But the yellowing of leaves that we see on these plants is mostly due to extra sunlight. And you can see that the roots of these plants are clinging onto the metal gate and they are growing really well. And I had used a little clip to support this onto the metal gate so that they could grow well and have bigger leaves. In plants like Pothos, philodendron, and Monstera, the trick to getting bigger leaves is the right amount of light and a good support system. So, these are the two things that promote a healthy growth on these plants and make sure that the leaves grow really big and look beautiful and healthy. A spot with direct sunlight is not the ideal location to grow monstera plants, and if you see yellowing of leaves or brown tips of leaves, there could be two reasons for this. The brown tips could be due to excess direct sunlight or less watering of these plants, and the same thing with yellowing of leaves. The leaves stay bright and green when they are grown in a spot where they receive indirect filtered sunlight. Too much of sunlight will cause these leaves to yellow and start to burn. So, occasionally we need to prune and remove all the dead leaves from these plants to make sure that there is no kind of infection that gets onto these plants through the dead leaves or through the extra moist leaves that are on the plant. So, if they start to decay and stay back on the plant, that can cause any kind of infection on these plants. So, occasional pruning and removing of dead leaves is very important when growing a lot of these foliage plants. They also need a support system like this metal gate that we see here, or a moss stick that I have done with the bigger leaf monstera plant. We had placed this plant indoors for a long time and it was doing well except for one issue that we were commonly facing after keeping them indoors, and that was mealybug attack. So I could see a lot of mealybugs that were infecting the leaves of this plant, the top part and also the base of the leaves. So in spite of trying to get rid of it by wiping off the leaves with a tissue soaked with neem oil spray or spraying them with neem oil, it kept coming back. And one reason for that could be the lack of air circulation when we keep these plants indoors. This is a great plant to grow indoors because it does really well in spots with bright indirect light. But one thing to keep in mind when growing them indoors is if it is kept too close to the wall or if it is kept in a corner where there is lack of air circulation, that might build up a lot of humidity and moisture around the plant and attract pests. These plants can easily be propagated from cuttings, and as I mentioned, this plant was grown from a cutting. And these plants have a lot of nodes, just like the philodendrons and pothos plants, and we can take cuttings at these nodes with just 2 or 3 nodes on each cutting, and we can directly plant them in a pot which has a little bit of compost and regular soil. The cuttings can also be propagated in water, and once we see any form of new root growth, then they can be transplanted into containers. So, this is the big leaf Monstera Adansonii that I have in our front porch, and we have the smaller leaf that is growing in a hanging planter on our patio. So, both of these plants are doing well, but the plant that is on the north side of our garden with less direct sunlight is looking more healthy and green than the plant that is on the south side of our garden, which gets occasional direct sunlight. So the simple tips to care for this plant are they are easy to grow from cuttings. We can directly plant the cuttings in a mixture of coco peat and a little bit of regular soil, or we can also root them in water, and they can grow very well in spots that have complete shade. So they just grow in spots that don't receive any direct sunlight and just have a lot of bright light. And they are a great indoor plant, except that we need to check for pests and make sure that we keep them in control before they spread and damage the entire plant. And if we are growing this plant indoors, make sure that they are not being overwatered, because that can also attract a lot of pests. So this is a beautiful foliage plant that we can grow in spaces that don't receive direct sunlight, and it adds a lot of greenery to indoor and outdoor living spaces. I hope you enjoyed a view of our beautiful Monstera plant and also a view of our front porch. There are a lot of foliage plants that we are growing on this porch, and I'll be sharing care tips of those plants in future videos. Please do stay tuned to our channel for more garden tips and gardening related videos, and don't forget to subscribe and support our channel. Please do share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know how you like our channel. We'll see you soon in another gardening related video. Thanks for watching Fresh from my garden.